some brains aren't ready for certain things, just like some bodies aren't ready for certain things. Which brings us into a really good climate culture pillow called broken window theory. And it certainly isn't something that we invented. There's a couple of social psychologists in the early 1980s, a guy named George Kelling and his buddy Wilson, who came up with broken window theory. And in a real small nutshell, it says whenever you have a building and there's a window that's broken, it's a matter of time, if it isn't fixed, that another one's broken, and then another one. And then that disorder will turn on the street in which the building faces. And New York City had some of the worst crime in big city history in the early 1980s. And there was a guy named Bernard Goetz who got onto a New York City subway, shot a couple of young men that tried to rob him. Nobody could understand it because he didn't fit the profile. Like he was like a civil engineer or something, and like he was just sick and tired of it. But the interesting thing out of it was these two social psychologists that took pictures of the inside of the subway car, and they found that it was filthy, trash everywhere, graffiti inside, outside. And a guy named David Gunn, who ultimately ran the New York City Transit Authority, came in, and he was a broken window theorist. And he said, I'm not going to allow any of these streetcars to go out filthy, dirty, graffiti. He would actually shop them. And a guy named William Broughton, who was the police chief, jumped on board and said, if you jump over the turnstiles in the subway, the door's propped open, you go through, you get arrested. And people became furious. They said, you're going to clean up subway cars and arrest people for $1.25? And they said, yeah. And it all came back to broken window theory. It says if you clean up the smallest parts of the immediate environment, the game changes. And we all ultimately say this to teachers. And one of the first things for me when I walk into a school is I start observing. You know, is there trash on the floor? Is there disorder? Is there disarray? Now, most teachers, administrators will challenge you and say, well, that's not what's important. What's important are the big things. But the truth is, if you're a broken window theorist, you're sending both conscious and subconscious signals that you don't really care about the big things. And that's a huge argument you can get into with a teacher. But, you know, years ago, when we kind of formulated this, we went to a school that had some real challenges. And I remember just showing up there and having to try and find the principal. As I found the principal, we were walking down the hall together, and I stopped for a second and picked up a gum wrapper and went a little further and picked up a piece of paper. And she had actually stepped over a pencil that I stopped and picked up. And at that point, she said, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm just picking up some broken windows. And she kind of furrowed her brow, or however that saying is. And I took the time to explain to her. And truly, I mean, humans crave order, and children crave order. And I tell teachers all the time, like, you ever play a game with a kid? Like, change the rules on a little kid. Little kids don't like that because they expect order. Right. And they expect things to work properly. And when you have an environment that's full of disorder, it's very challenging. So one of the first things I always ask teachers to do is to pick up their broken windows. Clean up their broken windows. Take personal responsibility for the things around you.
And that's not just trash on the floor.
No.
So what would be some other examples of broken windows in a school that aren't physical broken windows?
Yeah, I think that trash is like I always, because I, am very familiar with the broken window theory, and it just, fascinates me that subway car that he talked about was, the theory is that this environment is a place where I can get away with things. And when you have broken windows in your environment or in your climate, there's students who bully, there's students who just aren't kind, they might not be bullies, but there's things that they can get away with in the shadows of the school. And additionally, Bernie Goetz rode the subway, I think purposely, with the gun, expecting to be robbed, and then being able to shoot somebody. And one of the teens that he went up to and shot a second time and said something like sarcastic, I guess I didn't get you good enough. So when you're in this environment where the perception is no one cares, and I can speak about my own experiences, there's been bus drivers that they don't care. They don't care. One method of a bus driver I could tell you a story about to get kids' attention is to jam the brakes. And what happens to everybody on the bus? They all hit their head on this
Right.
and fall. And it's like, so those are environments where the bus driver doesn't care. I can get away with whatever I want. For me, as a phys ed teacher and people who connect negative experiences or talk bullying to school, you're going to hear about locker rooms, you're going to hear about cafeterias, you're going to hear about hallways. And phys ed is certainly one of the, and that's probably why it makes sense that out of my environment was born the message of Sweethearts and Heroes. But for me, I hear things on the other end of the locker room, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, and I go down and I have conversation about it. I address the tiniest little details. I tinker with the smallest little nuances, and those are the shifts, just like painting a subway car white, that will curve the crime wave in New York City and curve the climate that we're in and fill it more with hope and action. Kids expect me to be at the other end of the locker room. Kids expect me to address the word fag when someone says something homophobic in the locker room. They expect me to have a conversation with them about more respectful behaviors. So
it sounds like, you have to deal with broken windows, but you also have to respond to them immediately. And the optics of that for kids and the climate that you're trying to build is profound. So if the people working and the students attending the school aren't feeling that windows are being fixed immediately, then you'll have more broken windows.
yes.
The subconscious mind is amazing. We say the brain does 10 quadrillion things per second. And if you don't think a kid is soaking up absolutely everything, I'd take broken windows to an extreme level. I mean, the teacher that when the kid walks in late, because he's always late, she's always late, and goes, like, that's a big problem. I mean, you just told the rest of the class that kid's an issue and that you really don't want him in here. To me, that's a real extreme broken window. Now, broken window theory was really, truly meant to address the immediate physical environment.
Sure.
That's what it was meant to. And I think Jason has morphed this, and I think we came up with this because one time he called me and said, he heard gay on the other end of the locker room, and he made a beeline for it. And he has sent the signals to the other people, the other students and faculty, that when things get broken, he's going to address them. And that's truly the key to broken window theory.
Well, an anecdotal proof of that is right before leaving the middle school, in my 13th year there, I had a 7th grade boy confide in me that he was a homosexual. If you're going to choose who to find as an adult male, I don't know if I would choose the bald, tattooed, goatee gym teacher that's a wrestling coach to confide in, unless he has reason to believe that I create an environment, a climate of respect, and he's heard me talk on the issue of homophobia and hate. So that was one of my favorite parts about being in the middle school. That was one of my greatest accomplishments. Was this kid came to me and wanted to have a conversation, and I think a lot of that particular one was because I questioned him on his bracelet, which was rainbow, and asked him the significance, and boy, did I find out the significance. It was powerful.
So something that's coming up for me when I'm listening to this, I'm thinking about how to put the two together. So it's a marathon, not a sprint, but you also have to clean up broken windows. So I'm an assistant principal, so I mostly deal with broken windows all day, every day. And some days I am reminding myself that it's a marathon, not a sprint. But how do you make sure that you aren't rushing to fix a window and doing things too quickly and not fixing, not working with both pillars?
Yeah, I think the two, what we're going to find with a lot of our pillars is they do intersect, as they should. I classify this as a ready for anything experience. Understanding and knowing all 13 pillars really well is whatever comes through that door, I'm ready for. And it's because I prepped my environment. I'm ready to be very artistic in my teaching style and very scientific in my teaching style, as well as look at all these superpowers I got with me. So when you talk about broken windows, I think of like the moments where something happens that could be shocking, harmful, hateful, something that's out of place. And then there's those reminders when I do bend down to pick up some garbage, the physical reminder that puts my mindset in a place where I got to watch out for those red flags. The marathon versus a sprint, I think of the kid who frustrates me, who's kind of existing and isn't necessarily as energized as they should be, isn't meeting my expectations, maybe because they're disrespectful, maybe because they're just half asleep, maybe they're suffering with some mental health issue, maybe they're super entitled and annoying and are not meeting my expectations, right? And the word annoying could be offensive, but let's be honest, there's certain learners that are going to try to annoy me as the teacher, right? And they can never know that I find them annoying. But
and they're also never absent.
There you go. So anyway, for me, they do separate, but I think that the marathon versus sprint is the way that I work with a student. I exercise a ton of patience is the reminder, and I've done that with my own kids, my own 2 sons, but also, and then the broken window theory is how is this space perceived by the people in it? Is it one that I can get away with anything, or is it one that, there's going to be accountability, there's going to be respect, and overall it's going to be a space where I can express myself?
I've driven in my own personal life and my business career. I have a set of core values that we run a business by that I'm part of, and it says, it's called Demanding Partner. It says our standards are high, we expect from others what we expect from ourselves, and we collaborate to achieve the best results for all. And I think for me, obviously we want to build that culture of excellence, but for me, having those high standards and laying it out there and saying, boys and girls, team, this is what are the standards that are acceptable for excellence. And we all can't meet them right off the bat. We're going to certainly collaborate to achieve the best results here for everyone. But understand that our standards are high. And if we say that window, it's unacceptable for that window to be broken, we're going to fix it. And we're going to try and maintain that within the culture where everyone doesn't feel like it's a problem. Changing that window is going to hurt someone or make someone uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So it's a great question. How do you blend the two, something that's long and arduous and takes a tremendous amount of time and effort to get there, and something that has to be changed immediately? Mm-hmm. And I think just understanding that it's okay to have those two, it's like night and day. The contradiction isn't a bad thing. There are things that we do need to change immediately.
I think you're forcing me to look at it too, which is what's awesome about some of your questions is you're forcing me to look at it. I think maybe as you question us on it, I think that the broken window theory is more of a classroom management piece. I talk to phys ed teachers all the time. I do some conferences, and I think that phys ed can really be quite a gauntlet of stress obstacles. Just walking through the threshold of the locker room, knowing that on the other side is this chalkboard or this whiteboard or a sign or no sign of what the heck we're going to do today. And if you don't change, you get a 0. So you got to get down to your underwear. You got to do the thing that's on the board. And if it says dodgeball or kickball or lacrosse, that could melt you down or excite you. And now I got people who are melting down and excited on either side of me as I get into my underwear. And then I tell you to go in the gym and run 10 laps, or I tell you to go in the gym and do some push-ups, or I tell you to run around 2 soccer goals, or I tell you to sit in the middle. That's a gauntlet of stress, because who am I going to sit with? And I don't want to run around 2 soccer goals. And I got a stomach ache, and my dog died last night. So all these different, so what can I do to reduce that gauntlet or stress cycle? And that is probably better management strategies. So some of the simpler broken windows, I think, comes from poor management. And I think on the marathon versus sprint piece is that general approach to just being patient.